Thanks for listening to Eat Your Content. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast through my merch store on TeePublic. Get great quality items like t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all sporting the vibrant Eat Your Content logo. Go to teepublic.com/user/eatyourcontent for more great items, and thanks for your support. Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast. I'm your host, Rich Herrera. Thank you for choosing my little pod. You have a lot of pods to choose from, but you chose mine, so thank you so much for tuning in. I want to remind everybody to follow us on socials. Follow me on Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Eat Your Content, and also at Rich Herrera if you want to follow my personal account. And a couple of program reminders. I am doing a series. It's called The Search for Jacksonville's Food Identity. So be sure to subscribe, set up alerts on your podcast player of choice to keep up when those are going to be dropping. It's going to be a multi-episode series on Jacksonville, where I'm from and where I live, and kind of our search for our culinary identity. Like, who are we as a city in regards to food? So I'm really looking forward to diving deep into that. So I want to welcome my guest for this first series of interviews on the search of Jacksonville's food identity. My guest today, he's a Jacksonville native, born and bred Neptune Beach, right down the road here from Jacksonville proper. He's a graduate of the University of North Florida, extensive knowledge of the First Coast, and has written about it all in his book, Secret Jacksonville, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. He's also a partner and writer at Edible Northeast Florida and co-owner of the websites moderncities.com and the jacksonmag.com. And currently, he's the city council liaison for Jacksonville's newest mayor, Donna Deegan. Welcome to the pod, Bill Delaney.
Thanks so much, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining the pod, Bill. I'm really excited to talk to you about the Jacksonville and Florida. Having grown up and being born and bred in Jacksonville, you have a deep love for the city, and I'm looking forward to picking your brain. So let's get right down to it. Florida's kind of weird, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Florida's weird. We got the whole Florida man meme that, seems to be great fodder for late night comics when politics is running a little dry. They'll throw a Florida man kind of story out there. And but how much, among all the weirdness, right, of Florida and what Florida is to the rest of the country, how much do you love Florida and specifically Jacksonville? How much do you love just being here?
Oh, I absolutely love it. They say there's no place like home, but I think that we have the benefit that everything that everybody says about the place is true. All of the weirdness and the crazy Florida man stories, those are all true. But there's also all of this other stuff just kind of underneath the surface of what most people outside of Florida see. And all of that is true, too. And, I think that together they create a pretty interesting place to live.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I was looking at Florida, like, why do all the weird stories come from Florida? Apparently, we have a pretty liberal information, dump that we're willing to give out to the rest of the country. And that's kind of like, we're not especially any more weirder than anybody else. We're just more free with the weird stories that we give out to people.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a lot of TV stations here that you're finding these stories.
Yeah,
exactly. And with our pretty open, like, sunshine laws on crimes, like those stories, anybody in the country can find them.
Yeah. And Florida also is kind of weird, like, geographically, right? Florida is the South, but it's not really Southern. You know what I'm saying? Jacksonville and the Northeast kind of region of Florida is kind of considered South Georgia a little bit. But once you start getting a little further south, there's this old saying about Florida is the farther south you go, the further north you are, right?
Right.
That line of demarcation seems to stop at around St. Augustine. And right around Daytona, sweet tea stops being the default tea when you ask for it.
Right.
And McDonald's, when they launched all day breakfast, they had this map of the United States and said, okay, you guys are going to get biscuits and you guys are going to get McMuffins. All of the Southeast was highlighted with biscuits except for Florida. Yeah. So all the Southeast states are highlighted in biscuit yellow, and except for us, and we're not the South. What is it about Florida that doesn't make it the South?
So it's just the way that the state has been settled over time and where the folks have come from to settle the different areas. If you went back 100 years, 150 years, all of Florida was the South. Now we had our own separate influences that were distinct from the South. We still had Spanish-speaking people that lived in Northeast Florida. It was largely around St. Augustine, but also in Tampa and in Miami, who have roots that really go back all the way to the start of European colonization. So we were, we had our own distinctive, flair already, but we were very much a Southern state. We were the smallest state by population around the time of the Civil War. When our state government seceded and joined the Confederacy, it was a breadbasket. It was smaller even than in the other states that were in the Confederacy. But what's happened since then is that the state has just rapidly grown through the generations. And so we've gotten a lot of migration. A huge percentage of our population are people that are not from Florida or haven't been here for multiple generations. And so especially down in South Florida, you had a lot of people coming in that were from Latin America, or that were coming in from the Northeast. And so that really has changed their culture, made it different. It's a fabulous culture. Miami is a great food city, a lot of culture, and it's come into its own, but it is very different than other parts of the South. Now, I will say, though, that when you say, it's not really Southern, well, what does Southern mean? It's not the stereotype of Southern, but every single part of the South is different itself. You go to Atlanta, that's one kind of thing. If you're out in rural Alabama, that's a different thing. Charleston is different. So there's already a lot of variety within the South. But Miami is a place where its whole connection to any of those Southern roots as such a smaller and smaller portion of its population now.
Yeah, so when I'm saying not the South, it's not what you would consider stereotypical South, like the antebellum homes, the old Southern history, the old oak trees, canopies. I mean, I guess you can go to Baldwin, you see some of those things, but it's not considered stereotypically South. And you talked about Miami a little bit. I've been living in Jacksonville for about 10 years now, and I've kind of seen the culinary growth of Jacksonville. But you look at cities our size, and they have some sort of culinary identity, like Miami and Tampa. They're known for their Cuban sandwiches, and there's a fight of, who originated the Cuban sandwich. That's a whole other podcast. But, they're known for that sort of thing. And
it was not Miami.
What's that?
I said it was not Miami that originated.
It's Tampa. Tampa all the way.
It's Tampa or Key West, but definitely not Miami. It predates Miami even being a city. But that can be another podcast.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, and then Key West, obviously, for key lime pie, and then you get outside of Florida, you have Chicago for deep dish pizza. You have Atlanta is known for great soul food. New Orleans is known for Creole, and so on and so forth. Barbecue in Kansas City, etc. So why is it that Jacksonville seems, and we're not a small city by any means. We're the largest city by land mass. We got almost 1 million, if not 1 million people living here now. Why is it that Jacksonville seems to lack that culinary identity?
I say that it goes entirely to marketing. We have distinctive food here, and we always have, and we have excellent food here, and we always have. What we've lacked are people that really value what we offer enough to celebrate it as a local thing, at least not for very long. It's a much more recent development to look at, things that can, stand out as a Jacksonville specific icon or food or whatever it is. And it's really, my experience, Jacksonville suffered big time with an inferiority complex. The people that lived here didn't think too much of the city, and that meant that they didn't they didn't think that the things that we have are all that unique or special or worthwhile, and so they didn't celebrate it, and so that didn't transfer to other people within the city, and certainly not to people without the city. But I think that, like, number one, that is starting to change. People are paying more attention to the things that make Jacksonville Jacksonville, and that's bringing some attention to some of the things that are common here that are pretty special. I would say that we have food items that are as distinct, they're as unique to us and as good as something like the Cuban sandwich in Tampa or Miami, or different types of food that are popular everywhere. The cheesesteaks in Philly, or the Rochester garbage plate, that kind of thing. We do have that stuff. It's just it's only been relatively recently that people have really been giving it the props that it's due. And the other thing with it is a lot of what is unique here is so common here that we take it for granted. The style of barbecue that we have here, Camel Rider sandwiches, those are things that I believe people just don't realize are so unique to Jacksonville, because when you're from here, you get it all the time. You get it in every neighborhood. It's only when you go outside and you really think about it and you're like, oh yeah, what we have is different than what they have here.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned marketing. So if Visit Jacksonville can just get Top Chef here and do a season of Top Chef Jacksonville, I think would change it all, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
you're right, because Jacksonville, it has great restaurants. I mean, just awesome restaurants. And like I said, I've been here almost 10 years now, and to see the growth of like the food trucks from 2014 onward, a lot of great high-end restaurants that are here. Like Michelin just decided to come to Florida and went to Tampa, Miami, and Orlando. Left Jacksonville off the list. They didn't come. They didn't come to our city.
Right.
We Visit Jacksonville. Those folks that work at Visit Jacksonville, you gotta get on it and get these Michelin star people down here and get us some recognition. So that brings us to your article you wrote on the Jackson Mag. You mentioned a couple of things of distinctive Jacksonville foods, and I kind of want to run down your list. You started out with 6 back a couple of years ago, and then you updated it to 9 after some reader feedback. So I want to run down this list of what you think is distinctive Jacksonville foods, and kind of how you came up with this list, and the history behind some of these foods, and then talk about them a little bit and what makes them distinctly Jacksonville, right? So the first one I think on your list was Mayport shrimp, and I live near Mayport. So I got to know Mayport shrimp pretty quickly after moving here and going to like Safe Harbor Seafood, which is probably one of my favorite seafood places in town.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, it's the shrimp boats are right outside the dock. Those things were swimming, minding their own business in the morning, and in the afternoon they're on my nachos, and they are fantastic. So, what is it about Mayport shrimp that makes it distinctly Jacksonville? Obviously, the location, right? But is there anything different about these particular types of shrimp versus shrimp that we would get elsewhere?
So yeah, and this is a common misconception. I think this is one thing where our marketing has done a great job, because everybody, at least when you're in Jacksonville, knows about Mayport shrimp. It's a bit of a misnomer, though, because Mayport shrimp isn't a special, different kind of shrimp. What it really means is shrimp that's caught out in the southeastern shrimp fishery, which is a very abundant shrimp fishery. When it was first discovered in the late 1900s, early 20th century, it was the most abundant shrimp fishery that was known to that time. And it's because the St. Johns River is a super highway for shrimp breeding. When the shrimp, they grow and mature in the river, then they go out to sea. And so there's just millions and millions of shrimp out there, and they go all over the Southeast, and our boats go to wherever the shrimp are. And so what I tend to say is Mayport shrimp are, really realistically, it's any shrimp that's caught out in the southeastern waters and it's offloaded here in Jacksonville, particularly Mayport, but these days not only Mayport and not only Jacksonville even. Yes, St. Augustine has a very robust shrimping industry. And so what you're getting is you're getting fresh shrimp, as fresh as you can get. You're getting them from a very abundant fishery that just creates just very tasty, healthy shrimp. And you bring them in here. Yeah, Mayport, the name, it comes from obviously the fishing village of Mayport. It became the main shrimping offloading port in the early 20th century. Fernandina, right north of us, is where the modern shrimping industry actually started. And it spread all over down here because of the quality of the shrimp everywhere from southern Georgia down to St. Augustine. It really exploded at that time. And now it's to the point that Mayport shrimp's a household name.
Yeah, definitely. When you see Mayport shrimp on any menu, you definitely want to get it. So, and it is great. And I think Safe Harbor is probably the best place you can get it.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so I think I agree that Mayport shrimp is distinctively Jacksonville just because of where it's coming from, and it's not a distinctive color or flavor than any other shrimp, but it's just really fresh shrimp, and being a coastal town with boundaries by an ocean and a river, you expect that, right? You expect really good fresh seafood to be in Jacksonville, but again, not really known for seafood here in Jacksonville. We don't have that, distinct culinary. Oh, when I think of seafood, Jacksonville isn't the first place that comes to mind. But
no, it's not.
Yeah,
and it's really unfortunate. Especially these days, the shrimping industry is taking a big hit thanks to the imports.
Yes.
Of foreign farm-raised shrimp, which around here we just know is trash.
Yeah.
And shrimp from other places. But yeah, it's really unfortunate because we have all the resources here. We've lost dock space in Mayport. We have these imports coming in here that undercut the prices. Yep. We have everything that we need to build that back up and really become the seafood city that we deserve to be.
Yeah, and it's annoying when I go to a restaurant, and I get it with chains, like you go to Red Lobster or Longhorns or something like that.
Right.
You're not going to get Mayport shrimp. But what annoys me is when you go to like a local seafood place and they don't have Mayport shrimp.
It's the most infuriating thing.
How can you not? I mean, one, you're supporting a fellow local business, but that's going to distinguish you from these other chain spots. And I look kind of behind the kitchen, I see a stack of frozen shrimp boxes that they just got off the truck. I'm like, man. Why aren't you getting the Mayport shrimp? That's so awful.
Oh, and I hate it. I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I hate it when you go to a place that kind of the vibe of it is a very like local oriented vibe, and when you go taste the shrimp, it's the same frozen nonsense that you are going to get in in Birmingham, Alabama, or some other landlocked place.
Right.
That just infuriates me.
Yeah. So Mayport shrimp first on your list, and I agree with you that I think it is distinctly Jacksonville, and we are doing a good job of marketing that, and I think it is starting to become a household name in terms of shrimp around here. So the second one you have, and this was new to me, and I didn't understand it until I read your article, Jacksonville style garlic crabs. What? Now I've seen it, and a big styrofoam container of crab, and it's just like slathered in all this like seasoning, garlic seasoning, and it gets all over your hands. It's all messy, and it's fantastic. So what is it about this style of crab that's distinctly Jacksonville? Why are they called Jacksonville style garlic crabs?
So to answer that, we kind of have to go back to the origin of that dish. It's one of a number of dishes that are very popular around here that we just kind of consider to be soul food or Southern food, but that really came about in our region. And garlic shrimp, it's a variation of the seafood boil, which is popular all along the coastal South. And in other places too. It's called the Low Country boil because that's the term for the area that we come from. The Low Country is the stretch of coastal land going from Wilmington, North Carolina in the north down to about St. Augustine in the south. And what was distinctive about that was it's the home of the Gullah Geechee people. And the Gullah Geechee are the descendants of mostly West Africans who were enslaved on plantations in the Sea Islands and nearby inland areas. between Wilmington, North Carolina, and St. Augustine. And in the amount of time that their culture was growing, they created a culture and life ways, a language, all their own. And one of the big parts of that culture was their dishes, their food. The garlic crabs, like the seafood boil, comes from the early days where it mixes the elements of everything that the Gullah Geechee people had access to. First, you would take a grain, it's often grits or rice or something like that, and that would have been a plantation ration. And then you supplement it with spices that are something that would be easy to grow in, a garden outside of your home, that largely came from West Africa, also a bit in Europe, and just things that were native here, that were grown here. And then you mix that with a protein that's something that you would find in the local environment. So in terms of seafood, crabs are an easy thing to catch around here. Nowadays, like, they got traps, but even back before traps, they're easy enough to catch. Just taking a fishing line and putting a chicken bone on it, and the crabs grab it, and you pull it in, and you got dinner. You got enough of them. You mix them in this big pot with, with rice or grits or whatever it is that you got, and you have a wholesome meal that's really tasty that can feed the entire family. And so garlic crab specifically is one of those dishes that came out of the Gullah Geechee culture, where, you take the grains, you take whatever you got, you spice it up, you throw in the crabs. But the key ingredient is this garlic butter sauce. And that's, garlic, just mixed with, hot melted butter that you cook the crabs in, and it just tastes delicious. So Jacksonville is not something that's widely known or celebrated yet. We're working on that, but Jacksonville is home to the largest number of Gullah Geechee descendants in the entire country. And that's because it's by far the biggest city within the historical Low Country area. It's bigger than places like Charleston or Savannah, and it just has a massive population, and a large chunk of our African American population are people that have Gullah Geechee roots. It's not something that even a lot of people who are Gullah Geechee descendants really know, but because of that, we have distinctive foodways that come from our Gullah Geechee forefathers. And garlic crabs is just one that happened to really take off here. It's to the point that you can get garlic crabs all over the Low Country, and in some other places as well. You can go up to Charleston, you can find them, but here it's just a proliferation of them, to the point that, I heard stories about people who are from Georgia that they'll drive right past their own garlic crab places to come to Jacksonville to get them. There was a place in South Carolina that advertised having Jacksonville style garlic crabs because they wanted people to know that it was that kind of garlic crabs. And it's very much something that depends on what side of town and your ethnic background. African American people, everyone that I talk to, it's very commonly known. You go to another side of town or to other people out in the suburbs, it's something that people are like, what is that? Garlic crabs, what is that? So even within the same city, it's not something that's as well known as it should be, but there are dozens of places that do this.
Yeah. So kind of expounding on the Jacksonville garlic crab, you talked about Gullah Geechee. So included in your list was really Gullah Geechee cuisine in general, right?
Right.
And when I was researching, I found out that the area that I live in is the old Cosmo area, which was a big landing spot for a lot of Gullah Geechee.
That's right. Yeah.
Descendants. And so I was looking at, I Googled Gullah Geechee restaurants, Jacksonville, and it really kind of got mixed in with like soul food, right?
That's
so
right.
Gullah Geechee, soul food, are those terms used interchangeably, or is there a distinct difference between Gullah Geechee and soul food? And now we're just all calling it soul food just for, ease of mind association.
So the difference is it's a bit subtle. Gullah Geechee is kind of the historical origin of a lot of these dishes. And soul food in the 60s became a catch-all term for African American cuisine in general. Now, historically, a lot of what you think of as soul food actually originated in the Gullah Geechee culture along the coast, and it's spread, inward and outward, and then eventually northward during the Great Migration. But in origin, a lot of it is Gullah Geechee food. And what we have in Jacksonville is, you can see the Gullah Geechee influence more clearly here, just looking at places that do garlic crabs or do seafood specifically, because that's something that is very common here. But it's a term that isn't super common in some places, like Charleston have really capitalized on it. Everything up there is low country this, or there's restaurants that'll advertise themselves as Gullah Geechee cuisine. That really hasn't caught on down here. Even though I will say, on the record, I've said this repeatedly, and I'll say it again, Jacksonville has as good or better food than anything you can get in Charleston or Savannah, and you don't have to pay those tourist town prices to get it.
Right. Yeah, it's just, again, it's marketing, just straight marketing.
Straight marketing.
Get better at it.
That's right.
So the next thing on your list, I always associated it with more St. Augustine more than Jacksonville, but daddle peppers, right? And I wasn't familiar with daddle peppers until I moved here. And then I started seeing like daddle pepper hot sauce like everywhere around here. So tell us a little bit about daddle peppers. Where are they on the heat scale of peppers, and their origin, and how they're Jacksonville distinctive?
Yeah, so they're one that's more kind of Northeast Florida distinctive. I mean, really, a lot of this stuff is rather than Jacksonville specific, because daddle peppers are 100% a St. Augustine thing. That's where they are often. That's where they're most often grown. That's where a lot of the hot sauce companies are based or had origins in. But it's also extremely popular here in Jacksonville, kind of just by being so close to St. Augustine. But daddle peppers are a variety of the standard habanero style pepper. They are a very, very hot, small little pepper that's about the size of maybe one digit on your finger. They range in color from green to a gold to orange. Their key feature is they are extremely hot, but also a bit sweet, and so they go really well in things like a hot sauce or cooking them in a stew or something like that. And their origin is a bit of a controversy, because there's two different groups in St. Augustine, two different peoples that stake their claims to them. Both groups have very long roots in St. Augustine. It's the Cubans and the Menorcans. In the Cubans, there's always been a connection between Florida and Cuba. The Spanish conquistadors that first came here came from Cuba. Right. Florida was administered under Cuba in the Spanish era. And today there's a lot of influx between the two places. So Cubans had always been in St. Augustine. The Menorcans is a group that came a bit later, and they had their origins with a group of laborers that were hired to work a colony called New Smyrna, down where New Smyrna Beach is today, by a guy named Andrew Turnbull. He wanted to found this new colony. At the time, it was Florida's British period. And so he brought all these people from the Mediterranean island of Minorca and other people that were from Greece and Italy and what's now Turkey. But Minorca was kind of the main source of these workers. They came over here for only a short time before the colony failed, and the workers not having a way to get back to Minorca, they moved up north to St. Augustine, where today there's about 25,000 Minorcan descendants in St. Johns County alone,
Oh, wow.
and a couple thousand more in other parts of Northeast Florida. And the claims of peppers comes because, it's a very popular pepper among both the Cuban people of Cuban descent and of Minorcan descent. More Minorcans, you'll often find a hot sauce with datil peppers. It has a name like Minorcan Mike's or just Minorcan hot sauce. And that's because it's extremely popular among the Minorcan community. But the problem is that, the legend is that they were brought over by those early settlers from Minorca. But the problem is that those peppers are not grown in Minorca at all. They're native to the New World.
Oh, okay.
Even the habanero pepper is a reference to Havana, Cuba. They're a New World pepper, and what appears, the real history is that in the 19th century, a Cuban jelly maker from Santiago moved to St. Augustine, and he brought with him some peppers that were at that time popular in his region and grew them in his garden to make jelly with, and they caught on so much that they spread. And that only happened in like the 1880s. But at that point, the Minorcans adopted them as their own. And so it is very much, what I say is, it's very much a Minorcan American pepper. Whether or not it actually came from the old world island of Minorca, that's another question.
Oh, wow. So speaking of Minorcans, the next item on your list is something I've heard of outside of Jacksonville, but you mentioned is as something distinctively Jacksonville. Minorcan chowder, which kind of, when you look at it, seems to be like a cousin of the New England, clam chowder, or Manhattan, right? Manhattan clam chowder.
Yeah.
Yeah, Manhattan clam chowder, both red, both seafood. So is Minorcan chowder, even though it's, I've heard of it outside of Jacksonville, is it distinctively kind of Northeast Florida, and because of the Minorcans' connection to this area?
Yes, it is, and specifically because it has datil peppers. So it is essentially like a Minorcan style chowder, which, if you don't know your chowder history for any of your listeners, there's New England chowder, which is seafood with a cream base, and then Manhattan style chowder is a tomato base. And people in New England historically loathed Manhattan chowder, that it even would call itself chowder. They said it's just tomato soup with some clams in it. But a very similar chowder occurs down in St. Augustine. It was made by the Minorcan community, and its distinctive feature versus other types of Manhattan type chowders is that it uses datil peppers. So it is very hot and spicy, or at least to the level that you want. Often in a restaurant, they'll ask you what level you want it of spiciness. So if you want just a little bit of that datil zing, you can get that. But if you want the full-on Minorcan experience, you can also get that.
So Minorcan chowder, datil pepper, a lot of close connections there to Northeast Florida. So to cool off all that heat, the next thing you have are called honey drippers, which I'm sort of familiar with, is kind of a very kind of fruity Kool-Aid type drink. Now, I always consider honey dripper more southern in region than necessarily Jacksonville. So why was this included in the Jacksonville distinctive foods for you?
So what's really distinctive about honey drippers is not the actual dish. It's not distinctive to Jacksonville, rather. The dish is like you said, a southern thing. In fact, in Michigan, they have them as well. The Jacksonville part is the name honey dripper.
Oh, okay.
You'll find them called different things pretty much everywhere you are. My writing partner, Ennis Davis, grew up in Lakeland, and they had exactly the same thing that we had here, but he didn't have a particular name for them. In Jacksonville, they're called honey drippers. In other places, they're called things like, an ice pop. I don't have it up. I had a bunch of the crazy names that people call them in different cities. But yeah, they're effectively, you just take some frozen Kool-Aid, or you take some Kool-Aid or fruit punch, pop it in a freezer in a little cup, and you got yourself a honey dripper. It's a genius thing that anybody that has some fruit punch or Kool-Aid mix and a freezer can make.
Yep.
In fact, like in my neighborhood, in some neighborhoods, that they would have a designated honey dripper lady or a candy lady that would sell these little things to kids walking home from school, or you'd be able to get them from somebody who would make them either in a Jiffy store or out front or whatever. In my neighborhood, we didn't have that in Neptune Beach, but we did make them ourselves, and that's all we did. We just took cups and a popsicle stick,
Yep.
fill up the cups with Kool-Aid, pop it in the freezer for a while, and you got yourself a treat.
Yeah. I grew up in Savannah during my teenage years, so I was familiar with it. When I saw it on the list, I was like, "Oh yeah, we had a lot of those in Savannah." And yeah, you just take a little Dixie cup, fill it with Kool-Aid, throw it in the freezer with a popsicle stick there, and a couple of hours, you got yourself a little ice pop to cool you off on a hot summer day. So it's the Honey Dripper name that makes it distinctively Jacksonville,
Right?
not
Yeah.
the actual thing itself. That's
Yeah, and now it's become something that's taken off so much in Jacksonville that you'll find gourmet ones that they'll put like cut up fruit in it, or they'll make their own mix. And they're gourmet, but they don't cost a whole lot more than a normal honey dripper.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
it's still a pretty simple thing.
Yeah, speaking of that, I had a chance to go to the Gray restaurant in Savannah, Georgia,
Yeah.
with Mahashima Bailey, and she served a honey dripper, like what you were talking about, a gourmet honey dripper. It
Yeah.
was in a little like Dixie cup size thing. It was at the end of the meal. It was like a little dessert thing, and it had the popsicle stick that wasn't straight up and down. It was leaning
Right.
to the side,
Yeah.
right? And it had the cut up fruit and like real juice, not Kool-Aid, but like actual fruit juice and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was good. It was good, but it was neat seeing kind of that thing that we would consider kind of low budget, kind of shoved
Right.
up a little bit. So it was pretty neat.
Yeah,
So
and you'll notice from this list that a lot of our stuff that is distinctive is stuff that's pretty low budget, kind of food for working people. Not the high end gourmet stuff, or at least not yet, or not that commonly.
yeah. So the next thing is kind of interesting because I never associated it with Jacksonville because of its origins, and we're talking about camel riders now.
Mhm.
And camel riders is actually kind of a pejorative for Arab Americans, but they kind of took that term and embraced it and made a very tasty cold cut pita sandwich on that. So why are camel riders distinctive? I mean, you look at it, it's pita bread with cold cuts. It's
Yeah.
it's that. So how is that distinctively Jacksonville? Why have we claimed that to be ours?
So the real distinctive part of that, you can find pita based sandwiches everywhere in the world, or
Right.
everywhere that you can get pita bread. People
Right.
are going to make a sandwich with it. And you can also find the specific types of things, a cold cut sandwich with, ham and cheese and, lettuce and some, Italian style dressing or whatever. You can find that in some places, but what makes it really, truly Jacksonville is that it's ubiquitous here. There's dozens of places that make them, and every neighborhood will have at least one place where you can get that. It's not common. It's not common enough in other places that it has that level of ubiquity. And in fact, it's one of those things that I think is just so common in Jacksonville that we forget that it's something, not every city you go to has a camel rider shop, right in your neighborhood. There might be one or two in a place like Atlanta or Birmingham or, up north, but here it's literally dozens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the Chic is all over. They got locations all over the place. That
Right.
seems to
We
be,
have an entire chain devoted to this dish.
yeah, and it seems to be the place to get a camel rider. And I'm ashamed to say I had my first camel rider just like a couple of weeks ago, but it wasn't from the Chic. It was from All American Hot Dog over there on Beach Boulevard.
Also a good one.
It was a good one, and you have to get a cherry limeade with it. Like you
Yes.
don't just get the camel rider; you get
No.
that and a cherry limeade. It's a combo that you have to get together. And there's something about eating that sandwich and then taking a gulp of the cherry limeade that just really play off each other, and it's really good. And I looked at it and I was like, it's just a cold cut sandwich. But then when you're eating it, it's really good. I mean, it's just something about it is just really good. The Italian dressing, and I see again, we were talking that a lot of these foods are kind of the working man's food. This is really a working person's food. You walk around with it. You get it for its ease of portability and to eat on the go and on the run, but it's still tasty and it fills you up. So yeah, if you're getting your first camel rider, head over to All American. They're not paying me for that ad, but that's it's a good place to go. And then there's other offshoots of camel riders, right? There's steak riders now. There's veggie riders, tuna riders, basically anything you put in a pita blank rider, right? So it's kind of come into its own. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because, and something I learned in researching this is that we have a pretty large Arab American population here in Jacksonville that kind of helped popularize this dish and spread it to those that weren't familiar. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was very much a product of our large and vibrant Arab American community. Yeah, they have roots going back to the late 19th century.
Yeah.
And Arab Americans have been involved at every level of Jacksonville society ever since then. They've been very common in food, but my boss, the mayor, Donna Deegan, is the descendant of the Hazuri family, one of the most prominent Arab American families here. Her cousin, Tommy Hazuri, was mayor. Her uncle, Larry Hazuri, owns the Desert Rider downtown.
Okay. So, yeah, and one thing I'm liking about this list just in general is the diversity of this list, right? So you have something that's prominent by Arab Americans that they brought, or, not necessarily brought with them, but just kind of it took it on as their own and popularized it. You have Gullah Geechee cuisine on here, and then with the Mayport shrimp and Menorcans and the Spanish with the daddle pepper, just a lot of diversity and a melting pot of different things that is really cool with Jacksonville because of our geographical situation of where we're in, major kind of port city, and a lot of different ethnic groups coming in and out and through Jacksonville. So the next one on the list here isn't a dish, but dare I say an institution? Luby's?
Yes.
Let's talk about Luby's. I think Luby's, because I'm part of a Facebook group called The Scoop on Facebook. We have about almost 100,000 members. And Luby's is really controversial, right? Some people are like, they love Luby's. Other people are like, Luby's is not great. So what is it about Luby's, the place, that makes it Jacksonville?
So Luby is just kind of an open-faced sandwich that uses ground beef and toppings. There's different kinds that you can get, and it's all from one chain. There was only the one chain that made them. They used to have a number of restaurants. Now they just have the one on Beach Boulevard, and still owned by members of the same family that started it. But it was one that I had not included in the early version of this article. I just didn't really think about it, but it was by far the thing that I got the most emails and comments about. How'd you leave out the Luby? And so I went back, I was like, I didn't think it was, a very unique thing, or, let alone something that you only find in Jacksonville. But it is something that it's one of those things that's kind of I would say maybe not a Jacksonville, origin. It's more something like a camel rider, where they took different elements of things that already existed and mixed them into a way that was unique to Jacksonville, and then it spread because the chain, formerly was extremely popular and had a number of locations all over the place. And so that's really that's the Jacksonville story of that. And it was another food like the camel rider, like most of the things on this list, that was, it was a fast food item. It was something that you could go in that would be a good filling meal for not too much money, and it wouldn't take you too much time to eat it.
Yeah. So Luby's, I have not had the privilege of going to Luby's yet, but I saw this on the list, and I'm going to have to make it a point to go out. Any particular type of Luby that people that have not been there before should start with?
So the marinara one is my favorite, and it's I think probably the most popular. And now, like you say, like some people, this isn't going to be for everyone. This isn't like a gourmet dish in in the way that,
Right.
that a lot of this stuff is. And this is a fast food item. So what you're comparing it against is something like McDonald's. I would much rather have a Luby than go to McDonald's or Hardee's or something like that. That's the caliber, of food. And, I would say that, people that don't like it, it's like, well, they're probably the people that also don't like, fast food in general.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of these. I mean, these are massive sandwiches. These are not
Mhm.
for the faint of heart. They are large. They are messy. They are definitely a knife and fork type sandwich if you're trying
Absolutely.
not to get stuff all over you. So the marinara lubi, I will definitely put that on my list and try it out. So the last one on this list, I was not even aware that Jacksonville had a style of this, but we're talking about
Mhm.
Jacksonville style barbecue. Okay, so when I think of style of barbecues, KC got the dry rubs and the St. Louis style, and Carolina with their sauces, and Texas is beef, and Alabama has, they're known for the white sauce. I did not realize that Jacksonville had our own style of barbecue. What is Jacksonville style barbecue?
So the distinctive feature Jacksonville style barbecue is really the sauce that it uses. Jacksonville's a really great barbecue town, but barbecue is popular all over the South, and particularly in the coastal South that we're a part of. But what really makes it distinctive is that it is a mustard-based sauce. It's typically got some combination of vinegar, molasses, and sugar. And it's in different proportions and quantities than other similar types of sauces that you can find. So like probably the most similar thing is like the Carolina-based mustard sauce. It's like that, but it's more on the brown side, more kind of more of a hearty sauce than less the must it's less mustard forward, I guess,
Yeah.
than the Carolina Gold sauce. But it's something that there's tons of places in Jacksonville that have a sauce of this type. It's something that all of the old school places here that are very famous, like Holly's is the oldest restaurant in Jacksonville that's still operating up in Northwest Jacks. That has it. Cotton's Barbecue on Main Street in Springfield has its own version. Jenkins is a chain with a number of spots. They have it. And the Pig. And then there's even some places that are newer will have it, but not really label it as their own thing. And sometimes they even say it's a Carolina sauce, even though it's clearly more similar to the stuff that you get at Jerome Brown's or at Jenkins than the true Carolina Gold mustard sauce.
Yeah, you did name some kind of old school Jacksonville barbecue spots with
Mm-hmm.
Jenkins and Holly's, and you think there some of these other places that are using the Carolina name because people understand what that is versus having to explain what Jacksonville style sauce is.
That's right. It goes back to our marketing problem, and the fact that people didn't really put value in things that were unique to Jacksonville in the past. There wasn't a lot of cachet for saying it was a Jacksonville style barbecue. And so they would say, oh, Carolina style barbecue is really popular and it's sort of similar to that. So we'll just tag that name on that.
Yeah, no frame of reference for Jacksonville style barbecue sauce.
Right. Yeah. Even though, I just named like a ton of places, and, anybody who goes out there and actually look, you'll find a lot more places than just that. It's a pretty common ingredient. We really ought to take more advantage of it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's your list of Jacksonville distinct foods, and I think it's a great list. But let's say you're running the city of Jacksonville's marketing department, right? You had to throw all your marketing dollars behind one of these foods on here. I know it's like trying to pick your favorite child, but
Mm-hmm.
which one of these nine do you think that Jacksonville as a city should really start kind of pushing forward and saying, look, come to Jacksonville, for hopefully vibrant downtown in the future, for our coastal beaches, but also come here for this food. What would you put your marketing dollars behind?
I would do the camel rider or just riders in general,
Yeah.
because there's lots of variants, and it's the one that we're probably the farthest along on. That one has gotten some attention within about the last 10 or 12 years, has gotten some attention outside the city. New York Times wrote up about it. It's something that in a lot of places, or a lot of like websites or magazines that talk about Jacksonville's food, like they're starting to mention it. So we're farther along in that one. Plus, there's just tons of places that have it, and it's something that is just visually distinctive. It's a sandwich in a pita that just pops visually. Like you can take a picture of that, and if you know what it is, you know it by the picture.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so for those that work for Visit Jacksonville, and on the off chance you're listening to this pod, throw your marketing dollars behind the camel rider. I can see a Top Chef challenge, build a camel rider. Like that would be great, right?
I would love to see that. Hey, let's make it happen.
I know, right? Let's go. Grassroots efforts. Let's do it. Bill, I think we did it. I want to thank you so much for coming on the pod and talking about this list. I had a blast just kind of breaking these down, and just learning more about these distinctive foods, things that I didn't know about until I read your article, and have expounded my knowledge of the food in the area, and things that I'm going to be out looking for now, and in general on menus, and catching those at the next time I go out to eat. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the pod.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I want to give you a chance to just kind of plug whatever you got going on. If you have anything going on, where can people find you on the social medias, any websites or projects that you're working on?
Yeah, you can find my writing, the bulk of it, at jacksonmag.com. A lot of my food writing also goes into Edible Northeast Florida. It's a magazine that my wife and I are co-owners of, and we're always trying to plug great stuff around town, and we also use it as a way to get other people to tell us the great stories and cue us in on the awesome places to eat.
Awesome. And those are free to pick up at various locations around
That's right.
Jacksonville. So Google Edible Northeast Florida, you'll find where you can pick those up. So and yeah, just as a reminder for everybody, follow us on socials at Eat Your Content at Rich Herrera. And again, hit like, follow, and subscribe on your podcast player of choice. I'm going to be doing a series of these interviews for the Search for Jacksonville's Food Identity. I'm going to be talking to both local people and people outside of Jacksonville that know Florida well, and hopefully you'll tune into those. So Bill, thank you again for coming on the pod, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich.